What to do with a bad payer. Sometimes it happens, doesn't it? You do work in good faith, you submit your invoice, and the payment never comes. I've talked before about how to protect yourself from this, so I don't want to talk about that today. What I want to talk about today is what to do if it happens. I know that what often happens for people is not very much. What often happens with you guys is you kind of avoid it and you hide from it. You get pissed off and frustrated, but often you don't do much. And you should, of course. Sometimes your customer will refuse to pay and raise some dispute or some complaint that they wish to resolve before they'll pay. This is very common, isn't it? And that's not okay. The terms of payment on your invoice and the terms of the agreement you have are clear, or they should be clear. If they're not clear, make them clear, get some proper terms and conditions. I can put you in touch with somebody if you need help with that. In no contract is it ever written that it's okay to withhold payment if you're unhappy with something. So don't accept. If someone agreed to your terms when they accepted your quote or signed your contract and you've raised your invoice according to those terms, then payment is due when it's due, and any dispute about the work or any complaint about the work is a separate thing. It's not okay. So that's that part. If someone doesn't pay your legitimate invoice, they're breaching your contract, and you should take action. A mistake is, like I said earlier, to let it slide. Don't do that. That reinforces to them that not paying is reasonable. Not paying is not reasonable. Lots of people do let it slide, often for ages, usually because of fear that it will damage the relationship with the customer. Right? That's usually what it is. It's an understandable fear, in fairness. Right? It feels like a conflict, which nobody wants. Customers have some power, don't they? So you're often afraid of upsetting them. You know, they can stop the work. They can withhold later work, especially if it's a repeat customer. They can badmouth you around town and damage your reputation. So the fear is real. But don't forget, the person not paying an legitimate invoice is the not you, unless you're the I guess. We'll leave that one on there. So what should you do? And the answer is enforce what it says in your contract. There are written consequences of not paying. There should be. Either it's raising interest, or it could be stopping work, or it could be escalating to a debt collecting agency or whatever. So if the consequences is that you stop work immediately. If it's something else, do that. Communicate in writing that the debt is an overdue, and the consequences will happen if they don't pay it by a certain date. That bit's important. Then if they don't pay it by the date you've stipulated, do the thing, whatever the consequence was. This process is important because you're stating that the debt's due in writing, and if they respond, any court, if it goes to court, will kind of see that as accepting the debt. So then you're having a different argument. You're having an argument about not paying a legitimate debt and not the argument about whether the debt's legitimate, especially if they acknowledge the debt. So that's helpful if you do end up in court. So then you've got options. Continue to hound them, unless they're right, which they might be, and they're either genuinely upset with you or they're scamming to avoid paying or they've got no money, then this is quite effective. Hounding them within the law, legally, usually means they'll pay you rather than somebody else, especially if they're juggling cash, which is often an issue. So the hounding part, the kind of legally pestering and demanding the money, it's quite effective. You should do it. You can hire a debt collecting agency to hound them for you and to take over this process for you. And if you're scared of falling out with them, or you don't want to do it, or you're procrastinating on it, get someone else to do it for you. Now, I'm going to talk to you about three types: the chasers, the lawyers, and the specialist debt collection lawyers. Okay, the specialist construction ones. So the chasers, you've seen ads for them, EC Credit Control and people like that. There's one called Bill Chaser. I found one the other day whose name is over here, Blue Chip Collections. They usually charge a fee of between 5 and 25% of what they recover, and they essentially do the hounding for you, right, to a business or to individuals. They'll point out the potential consequences of non-payment, and they'll apply pressure, and they'll continue to apply pressure, and they recover a lot of money. So I would start there, but it ends there usually. They don't often have legal lawyers. They don't often go to court for you. They usually just do the chasing, and if somebody still doesn't pay after a while, they come back to you and say, get a lawyer involved now. Some of them have a lawyer and can escalate to a lawyer. The next one's the lawyers. You can escalate to a legal representative who will send your debtor a legal letter of demand, which means a letter from a lawyer rather than a letter from you. You can go straight to that lawyer. There's no necessity for you to go to the chasers first. Now, the lawyer can escalate the matter by applying to court to rule that the debt needs paying, and the judgment can be enforced. Courts can seize assets or make people sell assets to pay a debt. That can happen. And that only helps if your debtor has assets for you to seize, doesn't it? Or for the court to seize. If they have nothing, you'll probably get nothing. So it's worth looking into that stuff before you go down this route, because of course lawyers cost money. Now, if your debtor is a business, the process is similar. You sue the business for the debt, and you can have the court issue a wind-up notice, and essentially sort of. The court adjudges the business of being unable to pay its debts because it hasn't, despite all the asking. So it must be insolvent and therefore has to be wound up and its assets to pay these debts off, your debt first. If they're broke with no assets, you'll get nothing. So it's worth checking if you can, because like I said, the process costs money. But this is a real threat. Right? If their business is not about to die, assuming they'd rather not get wound up, it's usually prompts people to pay. So it's worth doing. It sounds a bit painful, and it is. But if it's enough money, it's worth doing. Don't just let it slide. And the last one, specialist construction lawyers. If you're a construction subcontractor, there's a special law for you called the Security of Payments Act. It's a process to resolve payment disputes between you and your client without having to go to court. It's a kind of a dispute resolution process, mediation. It's very effective at recovering money for contractors without going to court. It's complicated, you should use a proper lawyer, and it has time limits, so get onto it quick. So my main message is, don't avoid it. Don't leave these age debts to age. Get onto it. Give it to somebody else to do for you if you're procrastinating and you don't want to do it. Don't leave your debts uncollected. Get your money. If you have a lawyer or a debt collector relationship already, get onto them early. And if you don't, and you have a debt or two, get onto me. Comment or reply debt, and I'll send you my little handout with somebody who does trading terms, a debt collecting contact, a debt collecting and lawyer contact, and a Security of Payments Act lawyer, and you can go from there. See ya.